At 80, Leonard Carter felt like a prisoner in his own home, trapped under the control of his only son. Each day blurred into the next, a monotonous cycle of silence and submission. But today, Leonard was ready to do something he never thought he'd have the courage to do. Leonard Carter had always been a man of purpose and strength. For decades, he had run a small but successful woodworking business, crafting furniture that bore his personal touch. Every chair, every table, every wooden frame carried a piece of him, the pride of a man who had built his life from scratch. But when Margaret, his beloved wife of 55 years, passed away 3 years ago, Leonard's life unraveled. Their home, once filled with warmth and laughter, now echoed with silence. Nights stretched into endless hours of staring at empty walls, and Leonard's once busy hands now trembled with idleness. It was during one of those restless nights that David, his only son, called. "Dad, you shouldn't be living alone," David said, his voice gentle yet firm. "Come stay with us. It'll be better for you." Leonard hesitated. The house he shared with Margaret held memories in every corner, the scent of her favorite lavender candles, the creak of the wooden floorboard in the kitchen where she used to dance while making dinner, the garden they both nurtured together. But David was right. Leonard was getting older, more forgetful. His back ached from years of bending over the workbench, and the thought of falling with no one around terrified him. Reluctantly, he packed a small suitcase, leaving most of his belongings behind, and moved in with David and his family. David's house was a modern 2-story in a gated community. Everything was spotless: the white walls, the glass tables, the marble countertops. Leonard's room was a small guest room at the far end of the hallway. It had a single bed, a dresser, and a window that overlooked the neighbor's fence. From the first day, Leonard felt out of place. He missed the creaky floors of his old house, the smell of sawdust from his workshop, and the comforting clutter of a life lived fully. David had insisted that most of Leonard's belongings be put in storage, to keep things neat and tidy. "Dad, you don't need all that old stuff," David said, sorting through Leonard's things without asking. "Let's keep the place minimal. It's better this way." Leonard nodded, his lips pressed together, but inside, a small part of him crumbled. Those old things were pieces of Margaret, pieces of their life together. Days turned into weeks, and Leonard's life became a regimented routine. Breakfast was served at 7 a.m. sharp, oatmeal with no sugar, as David insisted on a healthy diet. At 10 a.m., David's wife, Linda, would come in to remind Leonard to take his pills, blood pressure medication, a multivitamin, and a mood stabilizer David insisted he needed. Lunch was always a bland turkey sandwich and a glass of water. Dinner was at 6 p.m., after which Leonard was expected to stay in his room and not disturb David and Linda, who needed their space. David's tone became increasingly authoritative. "Dad, you need to get to bed by 9 p.m. You're not young anymore," he'd say, almost as if Leonard were a child. Leonard felt like a ghost in David's home, a ghost who could still see and hear, but not be seen or heard. His presence was tolerated, not welcomed. One evening, as Leonard sat alone in his room, he heard David talking on the phone outside. The walls were thin, and David's words seeped through. "Yeah, he's still here," David said, frustration evident in his voice. "I don't know why he's being so stubborn. I told him to sign the papers, but he keeps putting it off." Leonard's heart raced. What papers? What was David talking about? The next morning, David came into Leonard's room holding a stack of documents. "Dad, I need you to sign these," he said, placing them on the dresser. Leonard picked up the top page and squinted at the small print. It was a power of attorney document, one that would give David full control over Leonard's finances, assets, and medical decisions. "Why do you need this, David?" Leonard asked, his voice trembling. "It's just a precaution, Dad," David said, his expression tightening. "You're getting older, and it's better to have everything in order. Trust me, it's for your own good." Leonard stared at the papers, his mind swirling with confusion and dread. Was this what David had been planning all along? Had his son only invited him to live here, to gain control over his money? Leonard felt his chest tighten, and he struggled to breathe. Memories of Margaret flooded his mind. Her smile, her laughter, the way she'd always reassured him that David would take care of him when she was gone. But now, Leonard couldn't shake the feeling that he was just another asset to be managed, another thing to be controlled. "Can I think about it?" Leonard asked, his voice small. David's jaw clenched. "What's there to think about, Dad? It's just a signature." Leonard didn't answer. Instead, he folded the papers and placed them back on the dresser. David let out a frustrated sigh and stormed out of the room, slamming the door behind him. Leonard sat on the edge of the bed, his hands trembling. Outside, the sun was setting, casting long shadows across the room. Leonard's eyes filled with tears as he realized that for the first time in his life, he felt truly alone. In that moment, Leonard knew he had to make a choice. He could either continue to let David control every aspect of his life, or he could take a stand and reclaim his independence, no matter the cost. And as the room grew darker, Leonard whispered to himself, "I'm not a prisoner, not anymore." The next morning, Leonard woke up earlier than usual. The sky was still gray, and the house was eerily silent. David and Linda were still asleep. Leonard sat up in bed, staring at the stack of papers David had left on the dresser. The power of attorney document was still there, looming over him like a dark cloud. Leonard reached for the papers, his hands trembling slightly. He scanned the lines of legal jargon, each word feeling like a punch to his gut. It wasn't just a document, it was a surrender, a complete forfeiture of his independence. If he signed it, David would control everything, his bank accounts, his house, even his medical decisions. Leonard's heart raced. How had it come to this? When had David become the kind of person who would do this to his own father? Leonard pushed the papers away, stood up, and opened the closet. Hidden behind a pile of old sweaters was a showbox. Inside the box was a collection of photographs, snapshots of his life with Margaret, of David as a young boy, of family holidays and Sunday picnics. Leonard picked up a photograph of David when he was 6 years old, grinning widely, missing his 2 front teeth. Leonard swallowed hard. Was that little boy still somewhere inside the man David had become? Had Leonard failed as a father? A sharp knock on the door pulled Leonard from his thoughts. It was Linda. "Breakfast is ready," she said, her tone flat, eyes avoiding his. Leonard nodded and followed her to the dining room. David was already seated, scrolling through his phone. A plate of dry toast and a glass of orange juice sat at Leonard's place. David looked up as Leonard sat down. "Did you sign the papers?" Leonard shook his head. "I need more time." David's jaw clenched, his eyes narrowing. "More time? For what? Dad, you're 80 years old. You can barely remember where you put your glasses half the time. You need me to take care of things." Leonard bit his lip, fighting back the urge to argue. He felt like a child being scolded, but inside, something was stirring. A a spark of defiance he hadn't felt in years. "I'm not signing anything until I understand exactly what it means," Leonard said firmly. David slammed his fork down, the clatter echoing through the room. "You don't need to understand, Dad. You just need to trust me." Leonard met David's gaze, his eyes hardening. "Trust goes both ways, David. And right now, I don't feel very trusted." David's face flushed red. He pushed back from the table and stormed out of the room, muttering under his breath. Linda watched him leave, then turned to Leonard, her expression unreadable. "You know, he's just trying to help," Linda said, her voice soft but distant. Leonard nodded but said nothing. Help. Was that what this was? Later that afternoon, Leonard decided to get some air. He grabbed his coat and stepped outside. The chilly wind bit through his sweater as he walked down the street, each step feeling like a battle against his own weakening body. Leonard wandered aimlessly until he found himself standing in front of a small cafe, the same cafe where he and Margaret used to go every Sunday. He pushed open the door, and a bell chimed overhead. Inside, the cafe was warm and bustling with chatter. Leonard found a seat by the window and ordered a cup of coffee. As he sipped the bitter brew, memories flooded back. Margaret's laughter, the way she'd always steal the last bite of his blueberry muffin, the way she'd reach across the table to squeeze his hand, reminding him that he wasn't alone. Leonard's eyes welled up. He felt more alone now than he ever had. But as he wiped his eyes, a familiar voice called his name. "Leonard? Is that you?" Leonard looked up to see John Bennett, an old friend from his woodworking days. John was slightly hunched now, a cane resting against his chair, but his eyes still sparkled with the same mischievous glint Leonard remembered. "John!" Leonard exclaimed, a genuine smile breaking through the sadness. "What are you doing here?" "Just grabbing my usual," John said, waving a waitress over. "Mind if I join you?" Leonard nodded, grateful for the company. The two men talked for hours, reminiscing about old times, the fishing trips they used to take, the time they built a rocking chair that collapsed the moment someone sat in it. But as the conversation wound down, John's expression grew serious. "How's life with David?" Leonard hesitated. He wanted to say it was fine, that David was a good son taking care of him. But the words caught in his throat. Instead, he said, "I don't feel like myself anymore, John. It's like I'm not really living." John nodded slowly, leaning back in his chair. "I know that feeling. When Barbara died, I thought moving in with my daughter was the right thing to do. But after a while, I started to feel like a ghost in my own life. Like I was just existing." Leonard's eyes widened. "That's exactly it. David wants me to sign over control of everything. My money, my house, even my medical decisions. Says it's for my own good." John frowned, shaking his head. "You can't give up everything, Leonard. Once you sign those papers, you're no longer in control. And once you lose control, it's nearly impossible to get it back." Leonard swallowed, the weight of John's words sinking in. He had been so focused on trying to keep the peace with David that he hadn't stopped to think about what he was sacrificing in the process. His freedom, his dignity, his very identity. John reached into his coat pocket and pulled out a business card. "There's a place near here, a community center for seniors. They help people like us, people who feel trapped, who need advice, who want to regain their independence. You should go check it out." Leonard took the card, his hands shaking. It was a small piece of paper, but it felt like a lifeline. "Thanks, John," Leonard said, his voice thick with emotion. John patted his shoulder. "You're not alone, Leonard. You're never alone." As Leonard walked back to David's house, he clutched the business card tightly in his hand. He could feel the stirrings of something deep within him, a resolve, a determination. He wasn't ready to give up, not yet. When he got back, David was waiting in the living room, the stack of papers still on the coffee table. Leonard paused in the doorway, his eyes locked onto those papers. They were just sheets of paper, but they represented everything he stood to lose. His freedom, his autonomy, his very life. David looked up, eyes cold. "Did you think about it, Dad?" Leonard straightened his shoulders, feeling the weight of John's words pressing down on him. "Yes," he said, voice steady. "And I'm not signing anything." David's eyes flashed with anger. "You're making a huge mistake, Dad." "Maybe," Leonard said, stepping forward. "But it's my mistake to make." And for the first time in years, Leonard felt like he was finally standing on solid ground. David's face hardened as Leonard stood his ground. The tension in the room was palpable, and for a brief moment, the silence hung heavy like a dark cloud. Then, without another word, David grabbed the stack of papers and stormed out of the room, slamming the door behind him. Leonard remained standing in the middle of the living room, his hands trembling but his back straight. It was the first time he had ever defied David so openly. Despite the anxiety gnawing at his stomach, Leonard felt a flicker of something he hadn't felt in years: empowerment. He walked over to the window and watched as David got into his car, threw the stack of papers onto the passenger seat, and drove away at full speed. The sound of the engine echoed down the empty street, leaving behind a haunting silence. Leonard sighed deeply, sinking into the armchair. His heart was racing, and his mind was spinning. What had he just done? He knew that standing up to David was the right thing, but the aftermath of that confrontation left him feeling drained. Linda appeared in the doorway, her arms crossed over her chest. "What was that all about?" she asked, her tone sharp. Leonard looked up, meeting her gaze. "I told David I wouldn't sign the papers," he said, voice steady. Linda shook her head, her eyes flashing with irritation. "Leonard, he's just trying to protect you. You're being unreasonable." "Protect me," Leonard said, leaning forward. "Linda, he wants to control everything. My money, my house, even my medical decisions. He doesn't want to protect me. He wants to own me." Linda rolled her eyes. "You're being dramatic. David is just trying to make sure everything is in order. You're not as sharp as you used to be, Leonard. Maybe you don't realize it, but you need help." Leonard's jaw tightened. "Help or control?" Linda threw up her hands in exasperation and walked away, muttering under her breath. Leonard watched her go, his chest heavy. He was starting to feel like a stranger in his own family, an unwelcome guest who was overstaying his welcome. That night, Leonard couldn't sleep. He lay awake in the dark, staring at the ceiling, his mind churning with thoughts. Images of Margaret floated through his mind. Her warm smile, her reassuring touch, the way she used to stroke his hair when he couldn't sleep. If she were here, what would she say? Would she tell him to stand firm, to protect himself? Or would she tell him to give in, to keep the peace? Leonard tossed and turned, his frustration mounting. He needed to clear his head. He needed to get out. He threw off the covers, grabbed his coat, and slipped out of the house. The night air was cold, biting at his skin, but it jolted him awake. He walked down the empty street, his breath coming out in visible puffs. Without realizing it, Leonard found himself standing outside the community center John had mentioned. The building was dark, the windows empty, but a single light shone from a side door. Leonard hesitated, then walked over and peered inside. A small room was lit by a single lamp. Inside, a woman sat behind a desk, sorting through a pile of papers. She looked up as Leonard knocked softly on the glass. "Are you lost?" she asked, opening the door. Leonard shook his head. I was told this place could help people like me." The woman smiled gently, stepping aside to let him in. "Come on in. My name is Marla. What's yours?" "Leonard," he said, his voice a little shaky. "Leonard Carter." Marla led him to a small room with a circle of chairs. Posters on the wall read, "You're not alone, and your voice matters." Leonard swallowed, feeling a lump form in his throat. "So, Leonard," Marla said, taking a seat across from him, "what brings you here tonight?" Leonard took a deep breath, his eyes fixed on the floor. "My son. He wants me to sign over control of everything. My money, my house, my life. Says it's for my own good, but I don't believe him." Marla nodded, her expression empathetic. "And how does that make you feel?" "Like I don't matter," Leonard said, his voice breaking. "Like I'm just a burden." Marla leaned forward. "Leonard, can I tell you something? You're not alone. So many seniors come through these doors feeling exactly like you do, like they're losing control, like their voices don't matter. But they do, and yours does too." Leonard blinked back tears. "But he's my son. How do I say no to my own son?" Marla smiled softly. "By saying yes to yourself. By remembering that you still have rights, that you still have choices. Leonard, your life isn't over just because you're 80. You have the right to live the way you want." Leonard wiped his eyes, feeling the weight of Marla's words sink in. Could it really be that simple? Could he really say no and still be okay? Marla handed him a brochure. "We have a support group for seniors dealing with controlling family members. We meet every Thursday night. You should come." Leonard took the brochure, nodding. "Thank you," he whispered. When Leonard returned to David's house, the lights were off, and the house was silent. He crept back to his room, slipping under the covers and clutching the brochure tightly. He felt a tiny spark of hope, a hope that maybe, just maybe, he could take back control of his life. The next day, David confronted Leonard again. "Are you going to sign the papers or not?" he demanded, his voice sharp. Leonard took a deep breath, standing taller than he had in years. "No," he said, his voice firm. "I'm not signing anything." David's eyes narrowed. "Fine," he snapped. "Then don't expect any help from me." Leonard didn't flinch. He watched as David stormed out of the room, slamming the door so hard that the walls shook. But Leonard felt steady, unshaken. He walked over to his closet, opened the showbox, and pulled out the photograph of Margaret. "I did it," he whispered, touching her smiling face. "I finally did it." That night, Leonard packed a small suitcase. Just a few clothes, a toothbrush, and the photograph of Margaret. He took the business card John had given him and placed it in his wallet. Leonard didn't know what the future held, but he knew one thing for certain. He was leaving David's house. He was leaving the prison his life had become. And for the first time in years, he was walking away, not as a helpless old man, but as Leonard Carter, a man who had finally chosen himself. Leonard stepped out of David's house with a single suitcase in hand. The night air was crisp, and the streetlights cast long, eerie shadows across the empty road. He glanced back at the house one last time, the place he once believed would be a refuge in his old age. But now, it felt like nothing more than a cage. With every step Leonard took away from the house, the weight on his shoulders seemed to lighten. The community center was a few blocks away, and Leonard decided to walk. He wanted to feel every step, every inch of ground beneath his feet, a silent declaration that he was still in control of his own life. When he arrived, Marla was locking up for the night. She looked up, surprised to see him standing there. "Leonard," she asked, concern etched across her face. "What are you doing here so late?" Leonard swallowed, his throat tight. "I need help," he said simply. "I don't have anywhere else to go." Marla nodded, her expression softening. "Come inside." Inside, the community center was quiet, almost tranquil. Marla led Leonard to a small office at the back. The room was cozy, with a sofa, a coffee table, and a stack of brochures about senior support programs. Marla gestured for Leonard to sit down. "Do you want to talk about it?" she asked gently. Leonard took a deep breath. "I left David's house," he said, the words sounding both foreign and freeing. "I couldn't take it anymore. He was trying to control everything, my money, my decisions, my entire life." Marla leaned forward, her eyes kind. "That took a lot of courage, Leonard. Not many people would have had the strength to do what you did." Leonard nodded, but his chest tightened. "But now what? I don't have anywhere to go. I don't even know where to start." Marla smiled softly. "You're not alone, Leonard. We have temporary housing available here for seniors in transition. It's not much, but it's a safe place to stay while you figure things out." Leonard's eyes filled with tears of relief. "Thank you," he whispered. Marla stood up. "Let me show you to your room." She led Leonard down a short hallway to a small but clean and well-kept room. It had a single bed, a nightstand, and a small window that overlooked the park. The walls were bare, but there was a sense of warmth in the simplicity of the space. Leonard set his suitcase down and sat on the edge of the bed. The room was nothing like the spacious guest room at David's house, but for the first time in years, Leonard felt like he was truly in his own space. Before leaving, Marla handed him a schedule. "Tomorrow, we have a group session at 10 a.m. It's for seniors dealing with family conflicts and control issues. I think it could really help." Leonard nodded, clutching the paper tightly. "I'll be there." The next morning, Leonard woke up to the soft sound of birds chirping outside his window. Sunlight streamed through the blinds, casting gentle patterns on the walls. For a moment, he simply lay there, absorbing the stillness, the peace. After breakfast, Leonard made his way to the group session room. A circle of chairs had been arranged in the center, and a few seniors were already seated, chatting quietly. Marla greeted him with a warm smile and introduced him to the group. "This is Leonard," she said. "He's new here." Leonard offered a shy wave as the others nodded in acknowledgement. Marla took a seat next to him and began the session. "Today, we're going to talk about boundaries," Marla said. "About how sometimes the people we love can cross those boundaries and take away our sense of self. Does anyone want to share?" A woman named Ruth raised her hand. She was in her late 70s, with kind eyes and a voice that quivered slightly. "My daughter insists on making all my decisions for me," Ruth said. "She says it's for my own good, but it feels like she's treating me like a child. I can't even pick out my own clothes without her approval. Leonard's heart tightened. He could relate all too well. Another man named Bill spoke up. My son moved me into a care home without asking. Said it was for the best. I hate it there. I feel like I'm just waiting to die. Leonard swallowed, his fists clenched on his lap. The stories he was hearing were too familiar, too close to his own reality. Then, Marla turned to him. Leonard, would you like to share? Leonard hesitated. His throat felt tight, his palms sweaty. But then he remembered Margaret's words, the ones he had read in her journal. Don't let anyone steal your voice. Leonard took a deep breath. My son, David, he wanted me to sign over control of everything. My money, my house, my life. He said it was for my own good, but it felt like he was trying to own me. A few heads nodded in understanding. Ruth reached over and squeezed Leonard's hand gently. You're not alone, she said softly. For the first time, Leonard felt seen, heard, understood. The tension in his chest began to ease, and the knot in his stomach started to unravel. After the session, Marla approached Leonard. You did great today, she said. How are you feeling? Leonard nodded. Better, he said. Stronger. Marla smiled. That's good. And I have some more good news. We have a small apartment available, part of a senior living community nearby. It's affordable, and it would give you the independence you're looking for. Leonard's eyes widened. Really? Yes, Marla said. I can take you to see it tomorrow. Leonard felt a wave of relief wash over him. An apartment of his own. A place where he could finally be himself, without David's controlling influence looming over him. That night, Leonard returned to his small room, sat on the bed, and opened his suitcase. Among his belongings was the photograph of Margaret. He held it close, staring at her warm, familiar smile. I did it, Margaret, he whispered. I finally did it. A tear slipped down his cheek, but this time, it wasn't a tear of sadness. It was a tear of release, of liberation. Leonard had taken the first steps toward reclaiming his life. And as he drifted off to sleep that night, he felt something he hadn't felt in a very long time. Hope. The next morning, Leonard woke up with a renewed sense of purpose. Sunlight streamed through the small window of his room at the community center, casting warm patterns on the wall. Today was the day he would see the apartment Marla had mentioned, a place where he could truly call his own. Leonard dressed carefully, buttoning up his best shirt, the one Margaret had always said brought out the blue in his eyes. He looked at himself in the mirror. The man staring back was still Leonard Carter. Older, yes, but still here, still standing. Marla met him in the lobby. You ready? She asked with a kind smile. Leonard nodded, gripping the handle of his suitcase. Ready as I'll ever be. The drive to the senior living complex was short, but felt monumental. Leonard's heart pounded with anticipation. When they arrived, Marla led him through the main entrance, where a group of seniors was gathered around a large table, playing cards and chatting animatedly. Laughter echoed through the halls, a sound Leonard had almost forgotten. This way, Marla said, leading him down a quiet hallway. She stopped in front of a door marked 3B. This is it. Leonard took a deep breath as Marla unlocked the door and pushed it open. The apartment was small, a single bedroom, a compact kitchen, a living area with a window that overlooked a courtyard filled with flowers. The furniture was simple but comfortable, and the room smelled faintly of fresh paint and new beginnings. Leonard stepped inside, his eyes scanning the room. It wasn't much, but it was his. No more walking on eggshells around David. No more being treated like a child. This was his space, a place where he could finally breathe. "What do you think?" Marla asked, watching his face carefully. Leonard swallowed, his throat tight with emotion. "It's perfect," he said, his voice breaking. Marla nodded, her expression warm. "You can move in today if you'd like. The lease is month to month, and we have resources to help you get settled." Leonard nodded, looking around the room again. The window framed a view of the courtyard, where an elderly woman was watering a patch of sunflowers. Leonard smiled, feeling that familiar warmth spread through his chest. By evening, Leonard had settled into his new home. The few belongings he had brought with him were neatly arranged: Margaret's photograph on the nightstand, a small stack of his favorite books on the table, and a worn quilt draped over the armchair. The apartment was quiet, but it was a different kind of quiet, not the stifling silence of David's house, but a peaceful stillness, a silence that felt like a blank canvas waiting to be filled. Leonard made himself a simple dinner, a grilled cheese sandwich and a cup of tea. He sat by the window, eating slowly, savoring each bite. Outside, the courtyard was illuminated by soft garden lights, casting gentle shadows on the flowers. After dinner, Leonard sat down at the small desk by the window and took out a notepad. He stared at the blank page for a long moment, then picked up the pen. "Dear David, I know you're angry. I know you feel like I've betrayed you by leaving. But I had to do this. For me. I needed to feel like I mattered again, like I was in control of my own life. I hope one day you'll understand why I had to leave. I hope you'll forgive me." Leonard stopped writing, his hand shaking. Was he really ready to send this? Did he want to reach out to David? Part of him wanted to throw the letter away, to sever ties completely. But another part, the part that still remembered the little boy who used to beg Leonard for bedtime stories, couldn't let go. Leonard folded the letter carefully and set it aside. He would decide what to do with it later. The days at the senior living complex soon fell into a comfortable rhythm. Leonard joined the morning exercise class in the courtyard, where he met Ruth, the woman who had been watering the sunflowers. She was 82, sharp as a tack, and had a wicked sense of humor. In the afternoons, Leonard volunteered at the community library, shelving books and chatting with residents. And every Thursday, he attended Marla's support group, where he continued to share his story and listen to others. One afternoon, as Leonard was sitting in the courtyard reading, he heard a familiar voice. Well, if it isn't the man of the hour," John said, lowering himself onto the bench next to Leonard. Leonard grinned. "John, what are you doing here?" "I heard you finally grew a backbone and moved out," John said, nudging Leonard's arm playfully. "Had to come see it for myself." Leonard chuckled, feeling a warmth spread through him. Yeah, it was time. It wasn't easy, but it was time. John leaned back, stretching his legs. "And how do you feel now?" Leonard thought for a moment, watching the sunflowers sway in the breeze. "Free," he said finally. "I feel free." One evening, as Leonard was preparing for bed, there was a knock at the door. Leonard opened it to find Marla standing there, her expression serious. "Leonard, I just got a call from David," she said. "He's looking for you." Leonard's stomach clenched. "What did he say?" "He said he wants to talk," Marla said. He sounded different, less angry, more Lost. Leonard swallowed, his throat dry. A part of him had been waiting for this moment, but now that it was here, he wasn't sure what to do. "Do you want to see him?" Marla asked gently. Leonard took a deep breath, feeling the weight of everything that had happened press down on him. Then he nodded. Yes, I think I do." The next afternoon, Marla brought David to the complex. Leonard watched from his window as David stepped out of the car, looking smaller, less imposing than before. His shoulders slumped, his eyes downcast. When David walked into Leonard's apartment, they stood facing each other in silence. The air was thick, the tension palpable. Finally, David spoke. "Dad, I'm sorry," he said, his voice cracking. "I was wrong. I tried to control you, and it wasn't right. I didn't know how to let go." Leonard swallowed, his chest tightening. "Why, David? Why did you feel the need to control me?" David's eyes filled with tears. "Because I was scared. Scared of losing you. Scared that if I didn't take control, you'd slip away, and then I'd be alone." Leonard stepped forward, reaching for David's hand. "You don't have to control me to keep me close, David. I'm still your father, but I need to be free. I need to live my life on my own terms." David nodded, tears streaming down his cheeks. "I understand now. I'm sorry, Dad." Leonard pulled David into a tight embrace, feeling the tension melt away. For the first time in years, they were just father and son, two men who had lost their way but found each other again. When David left that evening, Leonard felt lighter, as though a great weight had been lifted. He sat back down at his desk, opened the letter he had written to David, and tore it up. He no longer needed to send it. Leonard sat by the window, watching the sun set over the courtyard. The sunflowers swayed gently in the evening breeze, their bright yellow petals reaching for the fading light. Leonard closed his eyes and took a deep breath. He was 80 years old. He had taken back his life, reclaimed his voice, and found a sense of freedom he never thought he'd feel again. And for the first time in a very long time, Leonard Carter felt truly, completely alive.